Right now, every time you start your car, buy a plastic water bottle, or pay your electricity bill, you are unknowingly participating in a 50-year-old secret treaty that keeps the United States as the world's only superpower. It isn't just the military or the tech giants that truly hold the world together. It's an invisible loop of black gold and green paper. But for the first time in half a century, that loop is fraying. And if it snaps, the life you know changes forever. We've all heard of the banking system and the stock market, but those are just the players. The petrodollar is the stadium they play in. It is the most successful financial architecture in human history, shaping our world for over 50 years and dictating everything from global energy prices to government policy. To understand why your gas prices fluctuate or why the US can print trillions of dollars without immediately collapsing, you have to understand a deal made in a smoke-filled room in the 1970s. But here's the terrifying reality. The world is currently witnessing a de-dollarization movement led by the world's fastest-growing economies. If the petrodollar falls, the US dollar doesn't just lose value, it loses its purpose. And when a currency loses its purpose, history tells us that empires follow shortly after. Today we are peeling back the curtain on the petrodollar, how it started, how it works, and why the million-dollar question isn't if it will end, but what happens to you when it does. To understand the petrodollar, we first need to understand why oil is the lifeblood of the modern age. We use oil to fuel the cars, planes, and ships that transport goods across the globe. It's in our plastics, our electricity, our fertilizers, and our chemicals. Our modern economy depends on oil for basically everything. Because it is so vital, there is a massive global market where countries are constantly buying and selling it. But how did the US dollar come to control this global market? To find out, we have to go back to World War II. At the end of the war, while most of the world lay in ruins, the US emerged with its economy and manufacturing base intact. This led to the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference, where countries agreed to make the US dollar the center of the global financial system. The promise was simple. The US promised that its dollars could be exchanged for physical gold. Because of this, other nations tied their currencies to the dollar, creating a new world order backed by gold. For nearly 30 years, this provided a sense of global stability. But by the late 1960s, the US was spending heavily on the Vietnam War and domestic programs. Foreign nations began to realize that the US was printing more paper dollars than it had gold in its vaults. When nations like France began demanding their gold back in exchange for their paper dollars, the system reached a breaking point. In 1971, President Nixon made a move that sent shockwaves through the planet. Known as the Nixon shock, he decoupled the US dollar from the gold standard. This transitioned the world into a fiat currency economy. A fiat currency is money issued by a government that isn't backed by a physical commodity like gold. Instead, it gets its value from public trust and economic stability. When the gold backing disappeared, the dollar stayed dominant for a while because the US economy was massive, and the government was seen as stable. However, the US needed a new anchor to ensure the dollar stayed as the world's reserve currency. Without gold, they needed something that every single human being on Earth required to survive in the 20th century. They found that anchor in 1973 during the OPEC oil crisis. In 1973, Arab oil-producing countries stopped selling oil to nations that supported Israel in the Yom Kippur War, including the United States. This caused oil prices to quadruple, leading to massive shortages and severe inflation in Western economies. The US realized that if they couldn't control the gold, they had to control the energy that ran the world. In response, the US made a major, history-defining agreement with Saudi Arabia. The deal was simple but brilliant. The Saudi Mandate. Saudi Arabia agreed to sell its oil exclusively in US dollars. The US protection. In return, the US would provide Saudi Arabia with military protection and support. The ripple effect. Since Saudi Arabia was the largest oil producer, other OPEC nations soon followed suit. The global arcade analogy. Imagine the world economy as a massive high-stakes arcade. To play any of the games, meaning to run your factories or drive your trucks, you need oil tokens. Now imagine there is only one booth in the entire world that sells these tokens, and that booth only accepts blue tickets, US dollars. Even if you live in Japan, Europe, or Brazil, you can't use your own local currency to buy tokens. You must first go to the blue ticket exchange. This creates a permanent global line of people waiting to get their hands on blue tickets. Because everyone is always waiting in line for them, those tickets never lose their value, no matter how many the arcade owner prints. This is the essence of the petrodollar system. This system meant that if you were a country like Japan, which produces almost no oil but needs it to power an entire economy, you had to do three things. You had to trade your goods to the US, to get US dollars first. You had to keep large dollar reserves ready in your central bank just in case oil prices spiked. You had to invest in US assets to keep those dollars working. This system creates a constant artificial global demand for the US dollar. This demand gives the U.S. major advantages. It keeps the dollar strong, it allows the U.S. government to borrow money at lower interest rates, and it allows the U.S. to use financial sanctions to influence other countries because almost every transaction goes through U.S. banks. But what happens to all that oil money? The oil-producing countries don't just store piles of cash, they invest it back into the U.S. This is called petrodollar recycling. They buy U.S. government bonds, invest in American companies, and buy real estate. It's a perfect loop. Countries buy oil with dollars, producers earn those dollars, and then they invest those dollars back into U.S. assets, ensuring the dollar stays strong. For 50 years, this loop was unbreakable. But today, the cracks are widening. Countries like Russia, Venezuela, India, and Pakistan have begun trading oil in other currencies like the euro or the Chinese yuan. This is the core goal of the BRICS trade alliance, a partnership of countries aiming to reduce global dependence on the dollar. The steelman argument, why the dollar still reigns. To truly understand the situation, we have to look at the steelman argument, the strongest possible version of the opposing view. Why, if countries like China and Russia hate the dollar's dominance, don't they just quit tomorrow? The answer lies in the concept of liquidity and network effects. Liquidity. You can trade 10 billion US dollars in seconds without moving the price even a single cent. But with the Russian ruble, or even the Chinese yuan, the market could crash because there are not enough buyers and sellers. Legal protections. The US dollar is backed by a transparent legal system and property rights. If a contract is broken in New York, you know exactly what the laws are. In many other regimes, the rules can change overnight based on political whims. The infrastructure of debt. Most of the world's debt is denominated in dollars. So if a country switches its oil sales to yuan, but still owes trillions in dollars, it creates a massive currency mismatch. That could bankrupt its local economy. It's like the Twitterverse Threads problem. Even if you don't like the platform, you stay there because that's where all the people, the conversations, and the liquidity of information are. However, China and Russia are now reducing their dollar use selectively. Russia has increased its oil trade with China using the yuan and settled transactions in rubles. China is now promoting yuan-denominated oil contracts and encouraging its partners to settle trades in yuan. They use the dollar when it's convenient, but they bypass it when it's politically necessary, especially under the pressure of sanctions. This isn't a sudden revolution, it's a gradual shift. China is even using the gold market to break the global financial grip of the dollar, contributing to gold prices surging to record levels. By hoarding gold, they are creating a plan B for a world where the US dollar is no longer the only game in town. The petrodollar system has been the invisible hand guiding the global economy for 50 years. It allowed the U.S. to become the center of the world and afforded American citizens a standard of living that was effectively subsidized by the rest of the planet's need for oil. But we are entering an era of multipolarity. As nations seek independence from Washington's financial influence, the loop is being tested like never before. If the petrodollar system fades, the consequences will be felt at your local grocery store and gas station. The U.S. would lose its ability to borrow money at nearly zero cost. Inflation would likely become a permanent fixture as the dollar's value is no longer propped up by global oil demand. The weaponized dollar, the ability to sanction enemies, would lose its teeth. We are watching a slow-motion transformation of the global order. It's not just about energy, it's about who gets to write the rules for the next century. The question isn't whether the dollar will disappear, it won't. The question is whether it will have to share the stage. If you want to understand how China is specifically using the gold market to accelerate this process and why gold prices are hitting unprecedented levels, you can watch our deep dive on the gold market right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. History does not just repeat, it rhymes. So make sure you are listening for the next Money Echoes. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.